We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Friday edition of Free Association Radio. This is Robert Phoenix coming to you live from the heart of South Central Texas, the capital of the state, the capital of the Lone Star State, Austin, where it's me, Lance Armstrong, and Alex Jones holding America together. Well, I can say that at least I am for the most part. Barely, though. I'm still battling with the viral invasion that's taken over my life for the last 3 weeks, terrorizing me. I'm being terrorized by viruses. Where the hell is the Department of Homeland Security when it comes to these terror virals, these terror viruses? Nowhere. In some ways, that's kind of part of the theme of today's show. In a roundabout way, being terrorized by your neighbors, people that you have a day-to-day relationship with them, and how seemingly mundane events can spin out of control, and then the next thing you know, you find yourself in a Hitchcockian film of your own making, or at least life's own making, where people can collide and collude and come together in very strange and surreal ways. And of course, I'm talking about the story of Diane Taylor, which we'll get to later on in the show. I just spoke with Diane this morning, and Diane was gracious enough to speak with me from her home in Northern Ireland. And the reason why I wanted to have Diane on the show was I was intrigued by her story, where again, and a lot of people have gone through this. I mean, people will have disputes with their neighbors over property lines, or they'll have disputes with their neighbors over sound. And this happened to me in my own life in a weird way. And I'll tell you what happened to me, and then we'll eventually matriculate to the interview with Diane. But I was living in Point Richmond, where I lived before I got here, and I had been there a year. And the thing that I liked about my place is it was a standalone kind of one-bedroom apartment. And next to where I lived was an apartment building. It was a very thin space between where I was living and the apartment building. And I'd been there a year, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I can just blast my music. Nobody's saying anything to me. Nobody's complaining. You know, and I was going through a phase of my life where, quite frankly, I was doing a lot of exorcism, personal exorcism. I just gone through the first stages of my divorce, and you play music loud at certain points in time because there's something you got to get out of your system. All right, I'm being honest. This goes on for a year, nothing. So then these people moved in next door, and I started playing my music, and all of a sudden now there's an issue. It hadn't been an issue before. Now there's an issue. So they're coming over to my house, and they're talking to me. And now I'm like, okay, well, fine. I'll turn down the music. And to me, the music isn't that loud. So then one night, the guy comes over, and he's, like, exasperated by the music. And again, this is not that loud. And I'm like, buddy, this has been kind of escalating. I'm about ready to stick my hand through the wrought iron gate, which I had, and just kind of wring his neck. I'm like, I'm tired of you harassing me about my music, which in my domain is pretty quiet now. I don't know what's going on. So then one night I played the music, and I went to bed. I'm in bed. I'm asleep, or close to it, and I hear a knock on the door. And the knock keeps going on and going on. I get up, and I say, who is it? So it's Richmond Police. I'm like, what? So we had a complaint about your noise. And I said, well, can you hear anything now? Well, no, I can't. But the neighbor next door says that you're playing music loud. And I'm like, okay, where do I go with this? So I'm thinking, all right, I'm gonna roll with it. I'm just gonna let this guy do his thing. And he's like, well, can you play the music for me? And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm asleep, and you want me to, like, do this dog and pony show. So anyway, I just decide, all right, I'm gonna roll with the. He's obviously into being proactive and solving a problem. So I'm gonna try to roll with the guy. So I play the music. Goes, oh yeah, let me go upstairs and listen from their house. He goes over to their place and he starts listening. I'm like, this is crazy. He says, well, yeah, it's kind of boomy. I'm like, but you're listening to it in here, right? You're not hearing anything. Or he says, well, yeah, doesn't really match up. So maybe you can change things around a bit. I'm like, okay, well, all right, fine. So he goes away, and then I find out that they had actually went on a campaign around the neighborhood with a petition to have me evicted. I found out because somebody who I knew had told me about this. And they'd gone to my landlord. I mean, it was just insanity, absolute insanity. So I thought to myself, well, let me just move my subwoofer off the ground. We'll put it on the desk, and apparently that did the trick because the subwoofer was carrying through the floor. And look, I understand. I get it. They wanted to sleep. I understand that. But you also have to understand that I was there for a year and nobody had complained. And I felt like that I was being singled out and whatever. But it went away. And but it was, it's weird how these things happen because all of a sudden they started to park in front of my house, taking up my parking spot. So there's, you see, I mean, I am sure everybody has stories like this where disputes get escalated, and the next thing you know, you're sitting in a court of law, or maybe you're sitting in a jail cell because there wasn't the right kind of mediation, or maybe the two people involved, couldn't extricate themselves from their experience or what was happening. People were getting triggered. Maybe there's karma. Maybe there's past lives. Maybe there's astrological transits that are, flickering in each person's life. But the fact of the matter is, what happens is that shit goes down and things get played out. So I had run across Diane through Facebook, and she has gone through something which you'll hear about, something seemingly mundane, and she gets caught up in a web of collusion and looks like corruption as well. And you'll hear about it. And I get into a pretty rigorous discussion with her about this. And she has a website where she gets into this in great detail, and she was on a talk show in England, and she was a part of a big story in a newspaper called the Daily Word, or the Sunday Word, I believe. And so this is a legitimate event. This is a legitimate case. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring her on, and I wanted to find out more about it and discuss a little bit about how these things occur and what we can do about them. And there's no resolution, really. Diane is still in the process of writing her book, and she's wanting to seek some justice and feel exonerated on a personal level that this event, which lasted in a nightmare 2 years of her life, can be put behind her. So we'll get to that in just a minute and play the interview. I just got to say, straight up, that I've fallen in love with this show called Moonshiners. And I don't know if you've seen it. I think it's on Discovery. I think it's on Discovery Network. And it's an interesting documentary. It's like a reality show where they follow 4 different moonshiners. And the thing I love about these guys is, well, number one, they operate outside the law, which I always find interesting. And number two, they have a very unusual and strong code of ethics, which is based on character and word. Like, very tight-knit community. They support one another. You don't go back on your word, because in that world, you really have to depend on each other. There's a lot of trust that has to be engendered. And so the word is everything. Loyalty is everything. And it's fascinating. It's a fascinating look at an outsider culture. And there's one episode left, although I'm sure you can find the other episodes of Moonshiners on Hulu or anywhere else on the internets. I'm just sharing this with you because I think it's a fascinating aspect of our culture, and especially a culture where things are getting more and more buttoned down in terms of things like surveillance, in terms of things like regulations and rules, and we're going to be coming up here very quickly on Obamacare, and that is a storm on the horizon, and there are going to be hoops that people are going to jump through like you won't believe. Essentially, it'll be layers and layers of more government that we're going to have to deal with. That's going to be just absolutely, Orwellian at times, I think. We have no idea what's coming at us. And, it may be the best thing that ever happened to this country. Maybe it all gets sorted out in spite of its own huge layer of titanic bureaucracy. But we're getting more and more of this in our lives now. We're getting more and more of the nanny state coming in and telling us what we can or can't do. And then we have these guys down in West Virginia and North Carolina and Tennessee, South Carolina, practicing their outside the lines profession of moonshining, living free. It's an interesting contrast, and one that I think holds a lot of appeal to people on some level. It certainly does for me. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's get into my interview with Diane Taylor, and I'm just going to set the stage here. Again, Diane, she lives currently in Northern Ireland, and she was living in Northern Ireland at the time of her ordeal. She has a daughter who is a model, a fairly famous model in Ireland, and Diane herself was a model. She's a very attractive woman, and we kind of get into this a little bit during the interview about whether or not this entered into why she wound up having an ongoing conflict with her neighbor. And it's really kind of an X-ray look into neighborly relations gone bad, and then using connections, familial and perhaps even organizational connections inside social services or inside the police department in order to elevate a case and in order to make somebody out to be a criminal or a perpetrator or an aggressor in the case of Diane and what was accused of her by her neighbor. Okay, so this is me and Diane Taylor from earlier today, and this is her story. About 2 years of her life spent untangling the knots between her neighbor, and a system which I'll let you determine from the interview feels like let her down. Here we go. My guest today, Diane Taylor, was the victim of a series of unusual and tragically unfortunate events that occurred in her life in the year of 2006, leading up all the way through the year of 2008. The events occurred in Northern Ireland in what was seemingly a minor dispute between neighbors, escalated and exploded into something that changed Diane Taylor's life forever. And we're going to find out about that today on the show. And I want to thank you, Diane, for having the courage to come on here and talk about your story.
Thank you for having me, Robert.
So let's get into some of the background around this. You're living in Northern Ireland. You have a family. You seemingly normal life. You work in the fishing industry or the fish industry, which I'm assuming a lot of people in Northern Ireland do.
Yeah.
And then one day, something happens outside of your house that changes your life forever. Can you take us all back to that day when everything begins to kind of explode for you and begins to get out of control?
What it was we weren't getting on with our neighbours across the road because they were intentionally, deliberately parking their vehicles outside my daughter's bedroom window, which is not a parking area. It's actually an area where you turn. And in actual fact, there was occasions when they were blocking that road and lorries, bin lorries, vans couldn't actually turn in that area. And they thought it was their God-given right to deliberately harass us by doing this, bringing all their friends and family. We were best friends with the next-door neighbour, Stephen. He's still very good friends with Sophia. And he told us they had lived there a few years previously and they had never, ever used that area to park their cars with the neighbour who had lived previously in Kevin's house. So what happened was we had stopped speaking for a few months and Denise Black had come out while I was going out to my Jeep and she had waved sarcastically as she had done many times before. Gooey, gooey. Now, I was not in a good mood that day because 5-6 days previously, her friend had upset me. Her friend had come out of the people carrier driving out while I had gone for a jog that day and I was walking into the cul-de-sac and her friend had pulled two faces at me and I was very upset. I went in and I said to Kevin, and I actually burst out crying about this because I was being harassed at that point very badly. So I said to Denise, do not wave at me, please. I don't appreciate this.
So Denise is the neighbor. Let's get the cast of character straight. She's the neighbor. Kevin, I'm assuming, is your husband. Is that correct?
He's my partner.
Your partner. Okay. Yeah. So there's Kevin, your partner, Denise, the neighbor, and you don't dig her vibe, and you're saying, hey, just leave me alone, right?
Yeah, I said, don't upset me. I've had enough of you and your games. I've had enough of your dramas. I've had enough of your friend pulling faces at me. Please do not wave at me. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. Now, my daughter was in the house that day, and I went in, and my daughter was actually sitting at her bedroom window at her desk with a computer, and she's seen everything what was going on. And I said, Sophia, I'm very upset. I've had words with that lady. I'm going out to see your daddy. He's on the shore. He was out gathering shellfish. So I went out to get in the Jeep again, And unbelievably, her and her husband came to the Jeep, surrounded me. Her husband was shouting, "What the hell are you saying to my wife? What the hell are you saying to my wife?" And I couldn't drive off. They were preventing me from driving my Jeep. So I started panicking. And I had to crawl out onto the passenger side, open the passenger side door. I got onto Kevin's private property, onto his grass, and then they both came at me, and her husband was shouting, "What the hell are you saying to my wife? What the hell are you saying to my wife?" I was the one who was in fear for my safety because I thought I was going to be attacked at this point with her husband because he was so angry. And I says, "You haven't a clue what your wife's up to. You haven't a clue. You're never here." And I think I called her something like an evil bitch. To be honest, I admitted this in court that I had called her an evil bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was upset and angry, and because they had come onto private property, onto the grass.
Right.
Then I went into Sophie, and I was absolutely shaken. And I said, "Sophie, they prevented me from taking off in the Jeep." And Sophie says, calm down, it's okay." So Sophie gave me a hug. And then I calmed down after about 20 minutes. And then they had gone back into their house. And I had gone out to see Kevin on the beach. And I was very upset. I was shaking and I was crying. And I said, "You know what they've done?" And then what happened that day, and I didn't know this until years later, they actually contacted social services. They got the police to contact social services to state that my daughter was in danger. They got a police officer. And then, several weeks after that, what happened was unreal. We had no further contact. That was it. We had a 30-second verbal. She got her brother, Dr. Lawrence Haslam from Dundonald Health Centre, to deliberately park his vehicle outside my daughter's bedroom window to try and antagonise me. Kevin and Sophie was witness to this. I went out to him and I said, because he was doing such a drama for a period of time, and I went out and I said, "You're upsetting my daughter. You're deliberately parking in front of her window and she's trying to do her schoolwork." And he started being sarcastic and he says, "Is your name written on this road? If your name's written on this road, I'll kindly move my vehicle." And then he started laughing and he says, "Do you have psychological problems? Are you disturbed?" And Kevin couldn't quite believe what he was hearing from this doctor. We didn't know he was a doctor at the time. We only got to find this out a few weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin says, "Excuse me?" Kevin couldn't quite hear Kevin couldn't quite believe what he was hearing out of this man's mouth.
So this is the next level of escalation. Nothing goes on between you for weeks.
Nothing.
And then this man shows up.
Nothing at all. We had not spoken, not waved sarcastically. She hadn't waved sarcastically.
So in your mind, this event is over.
That was it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this man shows up.
Yeah.
And starts to harass your daughter, and then you go over and you want to know what's going on, and he starts to make insinuations about your mental health.
Yes, there and then. And I was so upset. At that point, Kevin told him, "You haven't a clue what's going on here. You clear off to the other side of the road. You don't even live here." So we went in the house, and I was shaking. I was upset. I had an excellent relationship with my Dr. Dixon, who's now retired. I went and actually seen him a few days later, Dr. Dixon, and I was very upset. I said, we're having a bit of a neighbourhood dispute, and some male that I don't know, he's friends, I thought he was friends with Denise Black, has came, insulted me. He's called me psychologically disturbed, and he actually wrote that in my medical file. So then what happened next was unbeknown to me, because you have to understand, I didn't get to find this out till like a year later.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Haslam, and he puts this in his statement, says that he contacted the police, and he and a Sergeant Sheridan, who I've never met in my life, both agreed to contact the mental health department.
So this is the guy that was hanging out in front of your house.
Yeah, harassing me.
And he contacts Sergeant Sheridan to further escalate this and bring you into their web of quote unquote concern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So Sergeant Sheridan never ever came out to me, to say, was I okay? Was I of sound mind? Was these allegations false? He just went on ahead and made a phone call on behalf of Dr. Haslam. And allegedly, the mental health team phoned Dr. Haslam back. And Anne Wilson, who's a fantastic lady, she's been speaking to me for over a period of a few years, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Anne Wilson stated to me, Dr. Haslam wanted me sectioned. Okay?
Now who is Anne, and what capacity or what role does she play?
Anne Wilson was the head of the community mental health team in Carrickfergus.
Okay.
Okay? So I had numerous phone calls with her because I was very distressed about this whole situation. I couldn't quite believe this. So he had said that I was psychotic, delusional, bizarre behaviour. He feared for his family's safety. He feared I would self-harm. And he even says in his own statement, and I have all the statements, he says in his own statements that he had never met me in his life before, that altercation. He had only met me for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone to say that and to come to that conclusion after only speaking to me for 2 minutes and also witnessed by Kevin and witnessed by Sophia is unreal.
Mm-hmm.
It is unreal.
Yeah, it seems a little over the top for a lot over the top for somebody who doesn't actually know you and for a brief period of time, right? So then what?
So then what happened was, after they referred me to be sectioned, the neighbour just kept making nonsense stories up, like I was waving and frightening her kids. Me and Sophie were at the window waving. A few weeks later, her brother, Dr. Haslam, and her brother-in-law, Peter Black from Sea Park Crime, came back and parked in the same area.
So this woman is loaded. She's got a brother in the psychiatric profession and a brother-in-law who's a police officer.
Well, her brother-in-law works in the police in my hometown, Carrickfergus, which is rather handy and which is why I've been set up, I believe. Mm-hmm. And her brother is not a psychiatrist. Her brother is actually a doctor who helps ladies give birth.
Oh, I see. So he's like an obstetrician.
So he's nothing to do. He's not a psychiatrist.
So he's passing psychiatric judgment on you.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, crazy. It's insane.
So now the brother's been employed to harass you here.
Yeah.
Okay. And the brother-in-law is in tow. So what happens next?
I just want to state this. I ripped all these people and their lives to shreds in court because I said to Dr. Haslam, if you were concerned about my mental health and you feared for my safety or your family's safety, why did you keep coming back on numerous occasions whenever your sister, her driveway fitted numerous vehicles, but yet you kept feeling the need to come back and harass us by parking outside my daughter's bedroom window? It was just orchestrated. It was totally orchestrated. Anyway, getting back to when Peter Black from Sea Park Crime and Dr. Haslam parked their vehicles, I'd had enough, and I have a family member in the police, and she says if you're ever being intimidated or harassed, just record. The reason I recorded, and I've already stated this on live TV, was because their sports car was actually on the grass verge, which is private property.
Mm-hmm.
So I recorded this in their behaviour. They were behaving like 5-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. Then
the next thing, myself, Kevin, were going to go out to the police station, but we had a knock at the door. And it was the Constable Noel Teeny. And he says, we've had a complaint that you've been harassing Peter Black and the doctor. Mm-hmm. And I says, in actual fact, it's the other way around. They've harassed us and we've video evidence. So, we'll be out to the police station in a few hours. So then we went out to the police station and we presented Constable Noel Taney with the evidence. We also had 2 A4 sheets of paper that was written by me. It actually wasn't signed by Kevin, but it was from both of us. It was a statement of what was happening and how we were being treated.
Mm-hmm.
So Constable Noel Taney said, I want to put a statement of complaint in about this doctor and also this Peter Black from crime. Sorry, we didn't know he was from crime at the time. We didn't know Peter Black was from crime. It was actually Constable Noel Taney who told us.
Uh-huh.
I said, we want to put a complaint in about these two. And that's when we were told who they were, and we don't want to go there. We don't want to make a statement. I said, excuse me, and Constable Noel Taney says he's high up in the police. I says, I don't give a damn how high up he is. I want to make a statement. He says, look, just let's come to a resolution. Let's write down a few points you're upset about, and we'll put them to the blacks. So we wrote down a few points, like we didn't want them waving sarcastically. We didn't want them parking on our side of the road because they were upsetting my daughter, Sophia.
Right.
And a few other things. And then Constable Noel Taney got us to sign, to say that we would...
Right, he's trying to find a resolution without having to deal with a lot of internal pressure with powerful people inside of his department.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we went away thinking, that this will be resolved, nothing else.
Right.
So it was quite quiet for a number of weeks. But then, allegedly, Constable Noel Taney had cautioned both myself and Kevin that day, which is lies.
Uh-huh.
Complete and utter lies.
What do you mean by caution? And what day is that? Was that the day you signed your piece of paper?
Yes.
And what does he mean? What do you mean by cautioned?
We were cautioned under the Harassment Act, allegedly.
And you were, and does that mean like you were warned? Is that what that means?
Well, you see, there's a difference between a caution and a warning. But the thing is, when I was arrested, I was told that it was a caution, but then it was changed.
Uh-huh.
Whenever I was being interviewed in my first arrest, I said we were never cautioned. So then they changed it. They allowed Constable Noel Taney to change his statement to a warning. He had warned us under the Harassment Act.
Uh-huh.
But fast forward, continued making ridiculous allegations, and then the police came to the door again, and we went out to the police station, and myself and daughter were there, and Constable Whitten, he was a true gentleman at the start, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
He says, come on in here, come into the interview room. He says, do you know why you're here? He was very softly. I thought, oh, he's a gentleman of a police officer. He says, your neighbour's made another allegation. I says, well, actually, we're the ones being harassed, and we would like to make a statement of complaint. So then I says, Kevin's coming out, my partner's coming out, and my daughter was also sat outside and waiting on me. And Constable Whitten says, that's okay. You can wait. You can go out and wait till your partner comes along.
Uh-huh.
So I sat out and I was waiting in the waiting area with Sophia, and the next thing was a few minutes later, it was like he just switched. I had heard someone shouting in the background to get out and caution her now, and he just switched. He came. It was like a bull in the china shop. He grabbed me by the arm. He started shaking me. He started saying, I'm cautioning you under the Harassment Act. And at this point, he was actually dragging me through the door. He says, I'm going to arrest you now. And Kevin had walked in and witnessed this.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Kevin shouted at him, did I just witness you assaulting her? And then he went on in. He went all sheepish. He went on in to the room again and left me in the waiting area with Sophie and Kevin. And it was actually at that point where I thought this has gone too far. I'm now going to contact the police ombudsman. So the very next day or a few days later, myself and Kevin had an interview with the police ombudsman. This is before my arrest.
Right.
This is before I was ever arrested. So So we had complained that I'd been assaulted by a constable witness.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, things were spiraling out of control and what was happening. So they took a statement of complaint. And then, unbelievably, the next thing was, within a few weeks, I was arrested.
Okay, let's stop here for just a second, because I want to fill in a gap.
Yep.
When you signed that piece of paper that basically said, "Hey, this is what we want," and you shake hands and you think this is over, did anything happen between then and the time you wind up down in the constable's office and you begin to get harassed? Was there any threats? Were you having any moments between you and the neighbor that facilitated you to go back down there? What was the atmosphere like in that space?
I think what had happened was we had had enough of them parking at our side of the road. So then we started playing them at their own game, and we actually parked our Jeep on their side of the road. It got all very childish. So within minutes of us parking our Jeep on their side of the road, they had contacted the police.
So at this point now, and I think this is an important point, at that point you, for whatever reason, had decided that maybe because they were still parking on your side of the road, but you decided that you were going to kind of take it to them a little bit. Am I right in assessing it this way?
It was just nonsense. They continued waving sarcastically, and it was just petty nonsense.
Okay, so you guys still had not yet kind of resolved whatever it is that was getting under both of your skins. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then they make a complaint against you, and then you wind up back downtown, as we say here in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there's the aggravated assault.
Yep.
Your partner sees it.
Yep.
And then you file a complaint with the ombudsman. Now what happens?
I couldn't quite believe that the 12th of December 2006 I was arrested.
And how does this occur?
I had actually, on the 11th of December 2006, Kevin had just got a new big porch outside his house, and I had never stood at his door before, but because it was an enclosed porch, one of his workers, Simon, and a great friend of Sophia's had called, and he had stood talking to me. I didn't want to bring him into the house because sometimes teenagers have a habit of talking too long, and I just wanted to have a few words with him, but it actually ended up chatting for maybe 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Sophia was in the house at the time, and then Kevin called. After doing the shellfish, he called, and he actually continued talking to Simon for maybe half an hour also.
Mm-hmm.
So the next day when I was arrested, I thought it was some sort of joke, because the allegations that were put to me was, one of the allegations, which was unreal, was that I had stood in my porch animated with a Christmas tree. So when I put it to the police officers, in actual fact, there was Simon who was there, my daughter was there, and then her father joined. It was as if they allowed her to change her statement.
Uh-huh.
Because her statement tallied up to everything I had said in my interview. She had given precise times of when Kevin had arrived at the porch.
Uh-huh. So they were alleging that you were making out with a Christmas tree.
They were alleging that I was stood animated with a Christmas tree.
Now in America, I just want to let you know, it's encouraged. People, it's okay to make out with Christmas trees here. We're very environmentally, connected. But I don't see any harm in making out with a Christmas tree or showing, even if this was the case. I mean, you would be showing your love and affection for the spirit of Christmas. I mean, what's the big deal about it? What is the big deal about this? I'm missing something here.
This is just crazy. I mean, this is the crazy sort of allegations. I've actually put her false statements out, and I've been so angry on occasions that I've actually said, if people don't believe lie detectors, I've no problem getting Kevin to take a lie detector, Sophia, and all of my witnesses, because these allegations are absolutely ludicrous. They are ludicrous. And, I mean, I can't understand why this has gotten so far, and it's only gotten so far because of who she is and the connections.
So what charge did they arrest you under? Molesting a Christmas tree? I mean, how could they do this to you?
They charged me with harassment. They charged me with standing in my porch animated. They charged me with waving sarcastically. They charged me with having a verbal with her. And I want to say in her statement, she actually accused me of calling her the W word. And I have never used that. I'm a lady. You don't use the word W to another female.
Right.
So she's done nothing but even tell lies about the verbal. She wants to use filthy language like that. That's fine. But I've never called a lady a W word in my life.
Right. And when you say W, it's a word that rhymes with door, right?
She had alleged I'd called her. I won't even repeat it.
Yeah. So they come to your house, and do they lead you away in handcuffs? Is this what happens?
No, what happened was they came to my house. I was frightened because they were banging on the doors, and I was in the house on my own, and I sneaked out the blinds, and I seen that it was a few police officers that were banging on the doors like it was going to raid a house or something. It was unreal. Banging, banging, banging. They just kept on and on for minutes and minutes. And I rung Kevin. I was panicking. I said, she must be making up more false statements about me because the police are banging and banging. And Kevin says, don't worry, I'll be in about 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they were also harassing me by ringing the phone. And they'd left a message. Sergeant Miskelly says, this is Sergeant Miskelly. We want to speak to you regards an allegation. Diane, please ring the station immediately. And in the background, I had heard females laughing as if it was some sort of joke. So at this point, Kevin had come back to the house, and he had actually taken me down to the station. And Sergeant Miskelly says, yeah, well, we're going to arrest you now, Diane. And I said, are you going to handcuff me? And he says, no, you're a lady. So what happened was they arrested me. They didn't put handcuffs on me.
So you were down at the station because you were answering a report or an allegation, and you did so of your own volition.
Yes.
And then they formally arrest you there. Did they put you in a cell?
No, they didn't actually put me in a cell. They gave me a police interview. The first arrest was not put in a cell. The second arrest was a cell, but we'll go into that later.
Okay.
But I want to point out now, in my first interview, number one, the police officers did not advise me that I was entitled to free legal representation. I said, I am not paying £160 an hour for a solicitor, because I thought it was a bit of a joke at that time.
Right.
And they, in actual fact, should have said to me, well, you're entitled to free legal representation. But we all know why they didn't tell me that. So during the course of the interviews, the allegations, as I say, were ludicrous. Me standing in my porch, me waving and laughing, a verbal which she had alleged I had called her names that I hadn't.
Right.
And I stated at that point, oh my God, I wish I had a lie detector for this nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wish now I had taken a lie detector after my first arrest, because they would have saved myself a few years of misery.
Right.
But that didn't happen. Anyway, I was released and charged with harassment, and they told me that they would be sending a file to the Public Prosecution Service to see if they were going to take it to court.
Mm-hmm.
And then I received that file several weeks later, and I think that was one of the most upsetting days, because within this file, it was just the biggest load of nonsense and made up lies. The statements were ridiculous. It was like I was reading about another person, the lies they were making up about me.
Right. This is common practice, by the way, with a lot of police reports.
Yeah.
They have to they have to embellish details in order for their case to stick. So you're not in uncharted territory, just to let you know.
Yeah. So, fast forward, in December 2007, I don't want to mention any solicitors or anything at this point. Myself and Kevin had gone to a firm of solicitors in Belfast who are well known for fighting police and the corruption.
Right.
And a certain solicitor said to me, Deanne, you've nothing to worry about. This is absolute dribble. It's nonsense. A judge will get so bored will listen to this. He'll be yawning halfway through it, and he'll throw it out of court. So I believed this, but Kevin kept saying to him, no, you don't know what she's up against. You don't know how well orchestrated this is. You don't know the connections this lady has, her brother-in-law in Crime Sea Park. And Kevin was right, because we had a number of witnesses that we wanted to bring to court.
Mm-hmm.
And our solicitor says you don't need anybody in court, only yourself and Kevin. Now, that was very strange in itself, but you have to understand, I was never in trouble before, and if the solicitor was advising me, I was believing everything he was saying.
And this is somebody that they found for you and you're paying, am I right?
Mm-hmm. But this was the solicitor. I was actually entitled to legal aid at the time.
So okay, so he was like a public defender is what we call them here in this country.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
So, fast forward, the court day came, and I think she had about 9 witnesses against me.
Okay.
I'm just sat in court. Number one, the police officer who had assaulted me, Constable Witten, was there, and he says I was aggressive, I was this, I was that. The biggest pack of lies. Character assassination. Constable Tini said aggressive. It was like, they had it was all so well staged, they were all told what to say.
Right.
She had her friends telling the biggest pack of lies, bad character witnesses. One friend in particular I was just sitting there going, is this for real? One friend was a lady called Carlisle, who knows me for years, and her sister lives beside my mother, and she had put a false statement in to say that I had stood at my window and that she didn't want to go out to the car because she was frightened because I was stood at my window, and that she'd never met me before in her life. And I was sitting there going, is this for real?
Okay, so now this is getting kind of freaky because
bizarre.
Here's somebody that you've known claims that they didn't know you.
Yeah.
And they are not only claiming they never knew you, but they're feeling like you're somehow threatening them by your presence in the window.
Yeah, it's unreal. And I mean, you're allowed to do what you want in your own window.
So at this point, you're thinking, something's going on here.
Mhm. But I mean, it's so bizarre that her brother-in-law, Peter Black in Crime, I've mentioned this on my website, he put a few false statements in about me because he says that, okay, his statement was correct in the fact that I had recorded him and Dr. Haslam the day they were harassing me, that's correct, but he had claimed that I had followed him home, and in his statement he says, she followed me home that day, and I have no idea how she knew where I lived, but other than her following me home that day, and I had to pull my kiddies in for fear of their safety in the manner of which she was driving. Now, his next-door neighbour was best friends with my daughter, and his next-door neighbour also worked for Kevin, so this was quite clearly a false statement.
So this is a small town, too, and a lot of people know each other in this place, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, you're in trial. What happens next? How does this end?
Well, do you want me to go into the doctor? I've already gone into a lot of areas there on the TV interview, so do you want me to go into the doctor and the purge allegations, or?
Sure. Why don't you go ahead and do that? And then what I want to do is I want to get up to your second arrest, which is obviously the more traumatic one. And then I want to bring this as close to present as possible and find out where you are and sort of the aftermath. So let's go into the perjury piece, and then when we get to the second arrest.
Dr. Haslam was asked in court, did he contact anyone in regards to my mental state of health? He replied no. My barrister asked him again. He replied no again. Now, I had been told by the community mental health team that he referred me to be sectioned. So I knew there's something not quite right here. So I stood up in court and I said, you have just perjured yourself. And there was silence and shock in the courtroom. And the prosecuting barrister handed an A4 sheet of paper to the judge and says, no, Your Honour, no. It was actually the police. The police contacted the mental health team. So that was it. So it was like, this is an inside job. This is a cover-up.
So they changed the playbook. They flipped the script while this was happening.
Yep.
And what's going through your head at this point?
I just thought this is like something out of a movie, and it's happening to me, and I can't get out of it.
And you're feeling, I'm sure, very out of control as well.
Yeah, I was. It was just, is this for real? This is unbelievable. This isn't happening to me.
Right.
Unreal. And then after all after everyone had perjured themselves and told the biggest load of lies about me, the judge says, I find you guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
It's okay. It's all right.
And it was very disturbing because he says, you will receive a custodial sentence. So I think that was the most traumatic bit, because I knew it was all set up and orchestrated. They had done nothing but told the judge lies. So fast forward, he says he wasn't going to sentence me until he had sent me to your probation officer.
Mm-hmm.
So a few days later, we had a holiday booked for New York. We went to Waldorf Astoria for 10 days, but it was the worst holiday I've ever had in my life. I couldn't even enjoy it because I had the threat of prison hanging over me. So what happened was I had a fallout with my solicitor because I was deeply upset with how things had turned out in court, and how he had told me it would be thrown out in a court, and in actual fact it wasn't thrown out in court. So what happened then was I went to another solicitor, firm of solicitors, who stated to me, Diane, you do not need to go to your probation officer because you're pleading not guilty. You're going to appeal this. And I didn't go to the probation officer. Then what happened was things took an even more bizarre twist. I showed up to court in front of the judge, and that very day my legal team dropped me. They didn't want to represent me because they didn't want to talk about the doctor and the perjury, and they just dropped me. And I had to go in front of this judge and to tell him I've no legal team and I haven't been to a probation officer. And he was shouting at me and saying to me, how dare you come into my courtroom? You have been told to go to a probation officer. And I was trying to explain to him, Your Honour, with all due respect, my solicitor advised I don't need to go to a probation officer. Well, I'm the judge and I'm telling you, you should go to the probation officer, and you come back in here on such and such a date, and you had better have been seen by a probation officer, plus you better have legal representation. So that was it. I found a firm of solicitors who I believed I could trust, and then I was sentenced to, went back a few weeks later with the probation officer report. And I just want to say that the probation officer that I spoke to went through a lot of my statements, and she was very concerned. This lady had used her children in all the statements. She says that would be a form of child abuse if this was false.
Mm-hmm.
That she was using her children. There didn't appear to be any other witnesses other than her children in all of the statements.
So did you feel like that the parole officer was an ally?
I actually thought the probation officer was on my side at the time, but she says that she couldn't. What happens with the probation officer is that they're meant to write a report and say that Diane Taylor will never offend again, but because she couldn't state that I would not reoffend because I wasn't admitting my guilt, then I was given a harsher sentence. That's what I was told.
Right. Why did the legal team drop you? Did you ever find out why that happened?
I can't really go into this, but I know that they have connections with my previous solicitors.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to go into naming solicitors, etc., but I know they have connections.
Okay.
And to be honest, from what I have seen in the system, it's just rotten to the core. They're completely corrupt to high heaven.
Okay, so now you're in this Kafka-esque world where everything is sort of falling down around you, and you've seen the probation officer. Now what happens?
I was sentenced to a 6-month suspended for 2 years, and I thought this is unreal because I had a suspended sentence hanging over me till February 2010.
Right.
And that was very, very harsh because everyone was sending me. So I knew there was only one thing I could do because I was in serious trouble with this well-connected family. So I contacted the Sunday World. And fast forward, the Sunday World sat in court with me when I went into an appeal. And
this is a newspaper?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a top newspaper over here.
So they are chronicling your trial, literally.
Yeah, they were there for the case went for 3 days, and they were in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
And bizarre events happened before the trial started because the day before court, my solicitor and barrister sat me and Kevin down, and Kevin's the witness to all this, and they more or less threatened me. They were like putting a gun to my head. They said, we're not going to talk about this here, doctor, and the perjury allegations. Okay, it's not going to be talked about because it was the police who done all this. It's nothing to do with the doctor.
Uh-huh.
And I says, I've all the evidence. And it says, well, just you put all that evidence away and you get on with your life and you sign this bit of paper and you admit your guilt and you'll get a small fine.
So they just want this to go away now.
They want it to go away. And actually threatened my daughter.
Now some people, Diane, just to play devil's advocate a bit, some people would say, just sign the paper, walk away, don't look at your neighbor ever again, and put this damn thing behind you.
Yeah, Kevin told me to do that also.
Okay.
I was very upset with him because he told me to sign a bit of paper, but I knew if I sign a bit of paper, admit my guilt, this lady's going to make something else up and they'll just bang me up in prison. And anyway...
So you were afraid that this would lead to something else?
Well, not only was I afraid it would lead to something else because I knew she wouldn't stop. She just would not stop. And you have to bear in mind, this lady, when I was sentenced, asked the judge that I be removed from Kevin Steele's house because the name wasn't his house was in his name. It wasn't in my name. I had my own house at the time. So her main objective was to get me out of that house. And the judge was even amazed at that time. The magistrate judge said to this woman, "Excuse me, this is what the injunction is for." He couldn't quite believe she was asking that I be removed from Kevin Steele's house.
So she was taking extreme measures. Now let me just break in for just a second, okay? One of the things, if you look at Diane's picture on the show page, you'll see Diane, even though we used a picture with her in sunglasses, is a very attractive woman. And your daughter is one of the top models in Ireland. So we have two very attractive women here. Now, did your looks ever enter into this as far as, was this woman jealous? I mean, is this what this is all about?
Well, I don't really want to comment on that because, a lot of people have said to me that it was pure jealousy because of how I looked. And I've been a former model and I know how jealous and bitchy women can be. Not all women's like that. I have a lot of good friends and my daughter has a lot of lovely friends. But my daughter also gets a lot of jealousy and bitchiness also because she is in that field of modelling. My daughter's been in newspapers and she's been on, the front cover of Windows and she's been in magazines and everything. So I think that just comes along with the job, to be honest. But I myself don't want to say this lady was jealous of me, but, everybody else is saying that.
It would be a kind of a natural assumption. So she wants you out of the picture. The judge says, hey, that's a little over the top. Where does it go from here?
Where are we now? We go into the appeal, and the Sunday World are in the appeal.
Right.
Court. The doctor was protected. He was protected by the judge because I was gagged on asking him any questions. I couldn't ask him any questions on the referral or anything.
So you had a gag order. There was nothing that you could say or do in the midst of all of this.
I thought, what was the point of me standing representing myself? I mean, I even said to the judge, Constable Noltini neither cautioned or warned myself or Kevin Steele, and he's not in the courtroom, Your Honour. He should be subpoenaed. And she says, well, he's not in the courtroom, so just get on with it. Get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a solicitor and I'm not legally minded, but I would say that, you know, everything that's happening to me is just unlawful, what they're doing towards me, but they're doing it.
Right.
So, that's it. I mean, I knew that I was not going to win this. I knew I had done a pretty good job in the courtroom. I knew that I'd ripped them all to shreds in their lives, but they were never going to let me win because, you know, if they let me win, and the Sunday World did a fantastic story for me, ex-model represents herself in court and wins. I mean, every Tom, Dick and Harry would be representing himself in court, so I knew I was never going to win, no matter what. So I did say to the judge, I said, Your Honour, you know, if you don't throw this out of court, I'm going to be arrested again. She's going to make more false allegations up against me. And the judge says, if I hear of any more nonsense, I'm going to come down heavy-handed. She didn't say that.
Right. Was the judge a woman?
She was a woman judge, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But within weeks, the Sunday World had run the newspaper stories, and this lady had made up a further false allegation. And she was the one who was harassing me, and I had two witnesses.
So now there's a story in the paper. What was that story like? Was it sympathetic towards you?
Yes, it was. But they obviously didn't like it. You know, there was a glamorous picture of me as the ex-model, and it stated how my first statement had gone missing down the back of the shelf. And then the next story was with regards to her brother, Dr. Haslam, how he had referred me to be sectioned.
Right.
I believe they didn't like that story, so they plotted and schemed to have me sent to prison. And that's what happened next. What happened next was within weeks of the Sunday World stories, I was arrested. I've already told about my ordeal, about being arrested and all. I'm actually writing a book about it at the minute. I think this is the only way I'm going to ever get closure.
So they arrested you, and this time they actually put you in a cell, right?
Yeah, I think that was the most traumatic. I think they broke me that day, to be honest. I had been very tough up to that point, and I think they broke me that day. They really did. I was in a horrendous state. I was crying. I was distressed. I'd actually asked for a doctor, and it was actually a police doctor, and he seemed very, very cold towards me. I said, I can't take this anymore. This lady wants me in prison. She won't stop making false allegations. And he just looked at me coldly, and he goes, quite frankly, my dear, that's not my problem. And then they put me in a cell after that.
How did the arrest take place?
What happened was there was a 4x4 police jeep. It had come out to the house. I had just arrived back from holiday in Cyprus with my daughter. We'd holidayed.
Uh-huh.
And I dropped her off at the bus stop. She'd only started school that day.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gone to Kevin's house. And he had been very worried because while I was on holiday, he had said the police had called out and he feared they were going to do something nasty towards me. And I said, don't be so ridiculous, Kevin. I said, they're not going to do anything towards me because of the Sunday World stories, etc. But how wrong I was. How very, very wrong I was. They came to Kevin's house and they had head cameras in my face. And I was very distressed because the arresting officer, I had knew him from years previously. He had come out to my house when my house had been broken into. And I actually thought he was a nice guy. He was a handsome guy. he was lovely to me years previously. But there he was, stood with a head camera in my face, and I was distressed. It was a very humiliating experience. And it was even more humiliating whenever they put me in a cell and told me to use the toilet in the cell.
So what were they arresting you for at that point?
They didn't even tell me.
They just said you're coming downtown, and
yeah, they said that. Yeah, that's it. They just said there's been a further false allegation. Sorry, they didn't say there'd been a further false allegation. They said there'd been a further allegation made by Denise Black, and they were arresting me. But they didn't tell me what I was being arrested for until hours later.
Right.
So what happened was, when I got to the station, they were getting a good telling off by the sergeant behind the desk, because he was more or less telling, what are you bringing this girl here for? As if it was on such a trivial matter. Could you not have taken her to Carrick Station? Then what happened was, as you know, I was put in the cell and I needed to go to the toilet very badly, and the female police officer told me, there's a toilet in the cell, but it obviously wasn't the toilet I was used to.
Right.
There was a camera on top of the toilet looking down. You could see everything.
This is common, by the way, in this stage of induction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you are. You're in a place that is very unfamiliar and unkind and freaking you out.
Yeah. I also felt claustrophobic. I just felt like the walls crashing in on me. I just thought this was unreal. This is seriously like something out of a movie. I just had it in my head then. A lie detector. She's not going to get away with this. I had it in my head then.
Right.
I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but the only thing that kept me half sane that day was I was singing a Michael Jackson song. Don't let no one get you down. Keep moving on higher ground. That sort of kept me strong.
Sure. Yeah.
And what they didn't realise was that I had a family member who was in the police, who was the one who actually got me released from the cell. The family member stated to me they had arrested me on the Friday because they were planning on keeping me locked up the whole weekend.
Sure.
So she sent me a solicitor, and then we had the police interview, and in the police interview I stated, this is it, I've had enough. I'm going to get a lie detector test. And then I was released. I was charged and released. And then I want to point out to what happened the next day. A Sergeant Stephen Moore, who I'd come in contact with a few times previously, was sent out to our house. Sent out to Kevin's house. And he had come out on the pretense that it was to Kevin hadn't signed his statement properly or something.
Right.
But he started talking about the jet ski, and his friends had a jet ski and all this. And really what it boiled down to was, he turned around and he says, Diane, you're not getting a lie detector, are you? I says, yeah, you're right, I am. He goes, you can't use lie detector tests in court, you're going to waste your money. I says, I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn if I waste my money or not, because they sure as hell aren't going to put me in prison when I'm telling the truth, and she's making false allegations. So we more or less sent him packing. And he had been sent out to deter me from getting a lie detector.
Right.
But it didn't work, because I actually had Terry Mullins fly over from England, and I paid him £750 of my own money.
Right.
And I had to sit through a lie detector test. And that in itself was stressful.
Right, sure.
And then it caused me a lot of stress and anxiety after that, because they just kept getting me to go up to court for about 6 months after the false arrest, and I had to go up month after month after month, and they just kept putting the court date off. And then eventually I was told the charges were being dropped for me to go home. Right.
So by this point in time, they're thinking that they may want to cut their losses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before they dropped the charges, one of the court appearances was Kevin was there and I was there. And I had Kevin as a witness regards to the second false allegations, and I had a James Hartley as a witness. I also had a family member who was in the police as a witness. She would have been there to give evidence on my behalf. So what they tried to do is they tried to get me to go into court without all my witnesses, just me and the lie detector.
Right.
And the barrister who was supposed to be working for me said to me, Deanne, we just want you to go into court without your witnesses. And I thought, this is very strange. And Kevin was there.
Yeah.
And I said, why is this? She goes, we don't want the judge to think that Denise Black is being bullied. And Kevin says, hang on here. What are you talking about? Denise Black had 9 witnesses and all their lies and perjuring and all in the magistrate's court to convict her. And now you're going softly, trying to get Deanne in without all her witnesses. So Kevin lost his temper at this stage and he threw the jeep keys down on the floor and he said, tell you what, you subpoena me. So we went home. Kevin took a house and threw the keys down, and rightly so, because they were trying to railroad me into the court when none of my witnesses, so that they could probably slate the lie detector. And then what happened was a few weeks later, they dropped the charges. And I was absolutely disgusted because I thought, I'm going to get my day in court. She's going to be charged for what she's done to me. She's the one that's going to be sent to prison for what she's done to me and all her life. That didn't happen. And when they dropped the charges against me, I still had a further 13 months of a suspended sentence hanging over me.
Right.
Like a rope hanging around my neck.
Right.
But the funny thing is that when they dropped the charges against me, this was very bizarre. Denise Black never came back to her home. She never came back that day.
She never came back.
She never came back.
You never saw her. You never saw her again after that.
No, she put her house up for rent and for sale within weeks.
Now that is really strange.
Yeah, everything about my case is strange and bizarre.
Wow. Okay, so it feels like we just dropped into sort of an episode of The Prisoner or something like this with Patrick McGowan.
Yeah.
Especially with her putting the house up for sale.
Yeah, within
and now you're left asking yourself, well, what just happened over the last 2 years of this nightmare of my life? Let me ask you a question, Diane. You mentioned that you had a family member in the police department. Just out of curiosity, how come they did not intercede on your behalf earlier? I'm just curious.
Because they didn't want to bring the force into disrepute. So
they had an allegiance to their police force, and that was a conflict of interest for them.
I'm actually not speaking to my family member at the minute because although she got me out of that cell on the second false arrest,
right?
I'm upset with her because if she had stuck up for me long before she did, I don't think I'd be in this mess. But not only that, I'm writing a book and she's not best pleased about that.
So you experienced in your own way, layers of what many people would perceive to be collusion.
Collusion and corruption to the highest degree.
Okay.
I've no doubt in my mind.
And the reason for this, because it all is seemingly very trivial events. I mean, these are not like, it's not like you guys are competing meth dealers trying to, ace each other out. I mean, these are garden variety disputes, two people grinding on each other's nerves, and neither one of them seemingly willing to let it go.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that comes out of this in a way that is almost surreal. What do you want out of this? What would make you feel complete out of all of this?
To be honest, I would have walked away. I actually sent a letter to the Public Prosecution Service because I was fed up with speaking out in the public domain. I sent a letter to the Public Prosecution Service, and I says in the letter, look, I want to come to some sort of resolution, meaning I really wanted my name cleared. It's not nice waking up every day with a false criminal record for harassment.
Right.
If you go for a job nowadays, the first thing they do is they do a police check. But
well, they run your credit report first, and then they go to the police. But yeah, that's obviously part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the director of Public Prosecution Service didn't even reply to me. You know, I have the Justice Minister, David Ford, on my friends list. I have members of the policing board who have actually added me.
So you want this expunged from your record. This is what you want.
Yeah, but no one's willing to help me. They're willing to add me on Facebook. You know, they're willing to understand there's been a miscarriage of justice. Mm-hmm. You know, the police ombudsman was willing to come out to my house and say, this was ridiculous. It should have never been taken to court. You know, it was trivial. It was a trial run by Carrickfergus Police. You know, they're willing to say all this, but no one's willing to help me. I fought this for 6 years on my own. And you know something? At the end of the day, all I can do now is write a book. And that's what I'm doing. There's 20,000 words written on unlawful acts. And I intend to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Mm-hmm. Because the only person telling the truth in the courtroom that day in December 2006 was myself.
So let's say, for the sake of agreeing with you, and that all of these things that you are sharing with us have actually happened, and I'm not disputing that. This is your story, and we're listening to you and trying to understand this. What would you share with people that may have experienced something similar, or might even be in something similar in their own version of this right now? Based on what you've learned, what would you share with them?
I would tell them that if you know that you're telling the truth, you have to fight, you have to have hope, and you cannot give up. You can never give up. And I will never give up, because these people have tried to destroy me. They have assassinated my character. They've put me through hell. I'm now suffering from post-traumatic stress because of what these evil, vile individuals have done to me. Mm-hmm. And they may think they've got away with it, but they haven't got away with it, because if you Google each and every one of their names, all over the internet, what they've done to me, there's no getting away from it. There is no getting away from it.
Now, you were on a talk show. Was that in Scotland or in England?
That was in England.
You were on a talk show, and what was that like for you, and what was that like in the aftermath of the talk show, sharing your story?
Initially, it made me feel a bit better. I've heard a lot of other stories of corruption and collusion. Initially, it made me feel a bit better, but then, you know, I'm the one that's left with the aftermath of all this. I'm the one that has post-traumatic stress disorder. No one knows what it's like to be set up the way I have been set up. And to be honest, if it wasn't for the likes of the UK column who exposed serious corruption, you know, telling me, Diane, you'll never get justice. And even if you appealed the collusion and the corruption in the system, you're never going to get justice. The only justice Diane Taylor is going to get is writing a book. Okay? And if these people want to challenge me, please do. Challenge me. I've been speaking out against you for 2 years, and not one of you have challenged the truth, because it is the truth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, it certainly is a pretty tangled and gnarled tale of what appears to be, on the surface, collusion at a familial level, and certainly at a civil and communal level.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're a stronger person as a result of this?
I would say yes, definitely. I'm a stronger person through this.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there has been times where I've cried and I've been upset and I've felt weak, but yeah, I would most definitely say I'm a stronger person through this.
Well, if people want to find out more about your case and what you went through, where can they do that?
I have a website, and it's www.unlawfulacts.co.uk, and you can also click on to the Facebook through that website. I have all the documentation of all the evidence to back up my claims, and I have the lie detector test there on that website also. And I just say to people who's gone through any similar circumstances to myself at the minute. Just keep strong.
Okay.
Keep strong. The truth will come out in the end. I really believe. The truth comes out in the end.
Okay, well, Diane, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. It's certainly surreal and not uncommon. There are other people who have experienced similar things, different circumstances, but similar things, and find themselves in the grips of something they feel very unprepared and unable to deal with and cope with. So I want to thank you. It takes a lot of courage to talk about it, and wish you all the best, and I hope that you find resolution and peace and someplace where you can move on and feel as though you're vindicated and are whole again as a result of this. So thank you very much, Diane.
Thank you, Robert.
That was Diane Taylor from earlier this morning in our transatlantic conversation, which we, by the way, were able to do via the internet. This wonderful tool which now connects the world in a omnidimensional, omnidirectional, global brain of immense proportion, where we share experiences, where we share feelings, where somebody in the chat room can listen to what happened to the show today or on the show today and be able to share a very similar experience of what happened to them and have it be an absolutely, although triggering, perhaps a cathartic experience where there's a lot of support now happening right now in the chat room. And this is all part and parcel of the internet. Diane Taylor I would never have met or connected with Diane Taylor had it not been for the internet, had it not been for Facebook, had it not been for somebody who had recommended her to become connected to me. And as a result, we have a show, and then there's other things happening now as a result of this, real time right now in the chat room. I mean, my show is not therapy, but what's clear is that there's been an opportunity for somebody to understand that somebody else has gone through something similar, that they're not alone. It's happening right now. And perhaps as other people listen to this show, they will have their own experience and say, you know what, I'm not alone. Somebody else went through hell. And we're not going to question, really, why they went through hell. They did. And whatever happened got escalated and taken to levels that it shouldn't have been. And at the end of the day, there were people involved in using their power, position, influence to make a statement. And Diane is trying to clarify that to the best of her ability and to be able to move on from that in her life as well. So we have the opportunity to experience these things. Now, unfortunately, things may not always remain the same. We may not always have the opportunity to share, to talk about this, to bring things to light, to feel like we're not alone in this world. And why? Why is that? Because I just ran across a story on Yahoo, and this is from 21 hours ago, Reuters. U.S. Homeland Chief, Cyber 9/11 could happen imminently. That's in quotes, imminently. So Jeanette Napolitano, who is the head of Homeland Security, she's Homeland Security Secretary. She's the head of DHS. This is what she had to say. On Thursday, so here we go. Homeland Security Secretary Jeanette Napolitano warned on Thursday that a major cyber attack is a looming threat and could have the same sort of impact as last year's Superstorm Sandy, which knocked out electricity in a large swath of the Northeast. Napolitano said a cyber 9/11 could happen imminently and that critical infrastructure, including water, electricity, and gas, was very vulnerable to such a strike. This is why they put smart meters in place, by the way. It makes them more vulnerable than those good old analog meters, those prehistoric analog meters. We shouldn't wait until there's a 9/11 in the cyber world. There are things we can and should be doing right now. that, if not prevent, would mitigate the extent of damage, said Napolitano, speaking at the Wilson Center think tank in Washington and referring to the September 11, 2001 attacks. So now we're referencing 9/11, we're referencing Superstorm Sandy. We're raising those ghosts. Napolitano runs the sprawling Homeland Security Department that was created 10 years ago in the aftermath of September 11 and charged with preventing another such event. She urged Congress to pass legislation governing cybersecurity so the government could share information with the private sector to prevent an attack on infrastructure, much of which is privately owned. A cybersecurity bill failed in Congress last year after business and privacy groups opposed it. The measure would have increased information sharing between private companies and U.S. intelligence agencies and established voluntary standards for businesses that control power grids or water treatment plants. Business groups said the legislation was government overreach. Privacy groups feared it might lead to internet eavesdropping. New cyber legislation is being considered, but it's unclear whether it would get through the gridlock Congress. President Barack Obama is expected to soon issue an executive order that would set up a voluntary system to help protect some critical infrastructure and offer incentives to companies that participate. But without a new law, companies cannot be granted any kind of legal immunity for sharing information with the government and within the industry about potential threats. Officials have pointed to recent hacking attacks on U.S. banks as a sign that the cyber threat is real and growing. The clarion call is here, and we need to be dealing with this very urgently, said Napolitano. Attacks are coming all the time. They are coming from different sources. They take different forms, but they are increasing in seriousness and sophistication. Okay. Here we go. We are being threatened that unless you do something, that cyber attack is going to come and it's going to shut shit down. So you better do something now. And of course, there is the specter of the EO, the executive order. We're just going to sign that executive order. We don't give a shit. Be damned. Congress be damned. Senate be damned. We're just going to sign the executive order. Ladies and gentlemen, when is it going to end? When is it going to end? When can we just live our freaking lives? Please, let us just get on with our lives. Are we reaching that point yet? I mean, every day, every week, every month, there's something coming at us. It's cybersecurity laws. You got to pass this. We need more information. We need more surveillance. Hey, there's gun control laws. We got to take your guns away. Hey, we got to take your food away. You can't grow food in your front yard anymore. I mean, when is it gonna end? When is it gonna end? We got to raise your taxes. Yeah, we got to raise your taxes to deal with the shortfall because we gave away billions of dollars, trillions of dollars to banks, both domestic and abroad, that we'll never see again. And now you got to cover the shortfall. When is it going to end? They just keep ratcheting up the pressure every single day. Every single day. If you go through the comments, you'll find that people are hip to the trip. This is why they want the cybersecurity. This is why they want the controls. This is why they would like to shut the internet down and have something much more controlled. Let me just read. I'm just going through the top level of 4,941 comments, okay? In many years, I have come to a conclusion that 1 useless man is a shame, 2 is a law firm, and 3 or more is a government. John Adams. Same guy. A government big enough to give you everything you want is strong enough to take everything you have. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Thomas Jefferson. One of the great quote masters of all time, Thomas Jefferson. He failed miserably on the slave issue, but gave us great quotes and a great Declaration of Independence. Something is fishy about this. You're either with the United States or you're with the terrorists, period. Does that also include U.S. citizens? Or are we all to be suspects? Keep them scared. That's the name of the game. Beware of warnings from this government. It usually means they're about to take another of our freedoms away. Does anyone know how to use the English language? And anything can happen imminently. Something actually becomes imminent when it is actually ready to take place. So our fine leaders are saying that something can be ready to take place. What the heck does that even mean, aside from nothing? You know, there are people are waking up here. They are wising up. I mean, these are not, you know, truthers that are on fire. This guy says, in other words, they want to control the content and access to your internet to keep you safe. Laugh out loud. They have been playing this card for years now. The USA is the country that launches the most cyber attacks. That would be the U.S. government. Watch what happens, people. Our own government will produce this attack. Just watch. Imminent my patootie sharing of information is definitely code phraseology for letting the government spy on you on the internet. A cybersecurity bill failed in Congress last year after business and privacy groups opposed it. Business groups said the legislation was government overreach. She is the one who referred to veterans as right-wing extremists and warned that they would be behind terror attacks. Grab the media, the utilities, the food supply, and you've got instant sheeple for the government. I fear people like Neapolitan, not some cyber boogeyman. This is the woman who, as governor of Arizona, couldn't protect her citizens and state from the illegals crossing the borders. This is the woman who screamed for help to the Bush administration because she was so overwhelmed by the situation. This is the woman who Obama appointed to run the security of an entire nation. Makes sense, doesn't it? In doing what we can to create more paranoia while whittling away people's rights. Look, people are on to this, okay? People are on to this. They're on to it. They know what's up. It's happened too many times now. People are waking up. We're waking up. And that's a good thing. That is a really good thing. And the more that we wake up, the more that we push back, the more that we become empowered, okay? The jig is up. Just go through the comments. Just go through the comments. I mean, these are not revolutionaries. These are not people that are right-wing extremists. These are not, these are not posse comitatus, militia people. These are just average people putting their comments into a comment section on the back end of a Yahoo piece. These are garden variety Americans, and they're waking up. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God for the internet. It's one of the most important things that's ever happened to this world. And I know that sometimes it creates a sense of dislocation. Sometimes it creates these strange catfish-like relationships where people aren't what they're supposed to be. That's part of the game. It's part of the deal, people. It's part of how this thing is evolving. But I'll tell you what else it's created. You can go into my chat room right now and you'll find a group of people who show up consistently for this broadcast, who are getting to know each other and support each other and talk with each other. And there are links to these people in other places and other forums on Facebook. And I'm just one person. I'm just one person. There are other people like me who have the exact same thing going on. Something really profound is taking place. We are linking up on a collective level. We are sharing information at light speed. We are changing one another's lives in ways we can't even begin to comprehend. Can't even begin to comprehend. This thing is important, and it's not going away. There can be these threats that it might go away. Parts of it might be shut down. It's too big. I'm telling you, it is too big. There are too many people making boatloads of money, legally and illegally, to shut it down. They may shut part of it down for a brief period of time. But to draw a blanket over the whole thing, it's a threat. It is an absolute threat. All right, well, listen, I've got some great guests lined up. He rubs his hands together. I have a guest lined up in 2 weeks that hopefully, cross your fingers, we're about 90% home. If he comes on the show, you are going to be enlightened and inspired. And we're talking a person with major street cred. Major street cred. I've been wanting to talk to him for a long time. It looks like, cross your fingers, it's going to happen in 2 weeks. And then Alfred Lavermont Weber will be on the show on the 15th. So it will be, 3 weeks. 3 weeks from today, Alfred Lavermont Weber, we'll have him on the show. And we'll get into exopolitics. And maybe I can see if I can get him to bring, what's his name, Basaggio, along for the ride. Seems like he and Basaggio have a very tight connection. We'll see. Andrew Basaggio, the time-traveling lawyer. So, but here we go. It's the wonder of the internet. We get to connect, we get to share, we get to inspire, and hopefully we get to build, because that's the next stage of all this. We got to build. We got to build some cool stuff. And my guest in 2 weeks will hopefully give us some clues and some hints into how we can begin to change our lives with one key ingredient. And I'll leave it at that. All right, so I want to thank everybody that's in the chat room, that's listening in real time, that's listening to this broadcast after the fact as a podcast. I want to thank all of you for listening and supporting. I have a website, robertphoenix.com. I've got 2 new posts up. I have a post that gets into this weird timeline with Manti Te'o and the Harbaugh brothers and a bunch of other stuff. And then I'm doing a piece on, it's kind of a 2 to 3 part series, probably 3-part series on the false age of Aquarius. And that just went up went up yesterday. And then I've got a piece by Darren Williams, which he done, that I'm going to debut hopefully later today. I'm going to try and get a little sleep. I didn't get much sleep last night. The site went down for a little bit. I had to deal with that. But you can go to the website and you can read some of the latest stuff. And also, if you feel so inclined and would like to support what I do, I have a donation. It's a chip-in account. I'm trying to raise some money here for my continued efforts with the show and the blog, and to continue to bring you media that you enjoy and content that hopefully informs and enlightens you and adds to the value of your life. If you feel like you want to donate, you can go to my show page, or you can go to my website page, robertphoenix.com, and drop a few coins in the kitty. Always appreciated. And other than that, have a great weekend. Wherever you are, affirm your life. Affirm your life in the midst of the vice grip of control, the vice grip of illusionary control that wants to impose itself on our lives. Just remember, you're the pilot. You're the pilot of your ship. You can captain it through any storm. All right? All right, so use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step on what's possible, and do your absolute best to live life to the fullest this and every day. This is Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to the Friday Farcast. I want to thank Diane Taylor for coming on. I'll see you guys on Monday with the mashup.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed. And some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.